All right, happy Friday, everybody. I am technically recording this, but there's not going to be much to record because today it's all about you. It's going to be less about me talking about things and you all solving some puzzles. Just for a little bit of background, I've been teaching this class now. This is the fifth year I've taught this class, and my very first year, I was trying to figure out a capstone project for Excel. I think almost all of our activity was done in Excel at the time. So lucky you guys, it's only about half the semester this time. And I wanted to test on knowledge, and I've continued to use this one. If you know anybody who was at school back in 2020, you may recognize some of the usernames because they actually were students in my class. I didn't actually use their full names, but I did use first initial and last name, so that's kind of interesting feature. Which also lets you know that if you stick around long enough, I may put you into an activity. So you may have to disclose, say, don't identify me, Dr. Barnes. Which I've already put Jason in like 15 activities, so he doesn't know it yet. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I apologize, guys. So we're going to be doing some advanced functions in the form of an escape room. So basically what this idea was intended to do is to reinforce some of the advanced functions that you should have learned from Excel. I will say this may be a little bit more challenging for you all than it was for prior students. In the past, when I'd done Excel activities, I'd always done the class period of working through some basic Excel activities as a refresher and then giving the assignment. I basically decided that I didn't want to do that anymore because I felt like I was being fairly redundant, particularly since I know what's covered in AIS now. I didn't know it when I was writing at the time. So these are all functions that I'm assuming that you've encountered. I say functions. These are all functions or routines that you've encountered in previous courses, but you're going to have to recollect on all those to see if you can figure out how to utilize those in this framework. So let's go ahead and talk about the scenario that I've set up. So we've got Alan Davis, the CEO of the tax shelter, which you may recognize that. You will see that again. That was actually a running gag throughout one of my classes. For those of you who don't know, Alan Davis was a former professor. He retired in December 2020. I used to tease him mercilessly. He was a tax professor, and unlike Dr. Caden, he actually fought back. Dr. Caden is just too nice. I can't say anything rude about Dr. Caden. She's just too wonderful. But Alan Davis, he was just kind of the perfect. He was a lawyer and a tax accountant, so like the worst possible combination of attributes that you can imagine. So anyway, he's kind of the example that I use in here, and he's the CEO and founder of Tax Shelter Restaurants, and that was the example that I used in the class. And there's a fraud going on in the company. So you found this locked up Excel workbook, which obviously there's some license to creativity here. You probably wouldn't find something nearly so easy or obvious to crack, but bear with me. This is the kind of the activity. So there's a piece of paper with these following items, and these are not obvious what they are, but they appear to be transaction codes. They do not match transaction codes for the company, so they are encrypted. So you're going to have to decrypt these transaction codes. So basically what your goal is that you need to, one, unlock the Excel workbook, and then two, using these codes, figure out what transactions they relate to. Now, that's the fun part of the activity. I wouldn't be a real AIS activity if I didn't have an ultimate lesson here. So once you've decrypted the transaction codes and identified the transactions, you've got to determine when they're proper. And you're going to look through here and you're going to see they have to determine if they're approved vendors, if they're sequential order numbers and authorized ordering agents. Some of you might be saying, that sounds like test of controls, Dr. Barnes, and I'm going to say, no, that's not test of controls. This is proving transactions are proper. You're definitely not testing controls here, okay? By the way, you are testing controls here. That's basically what it'd be. But determining which transactions are proper according to the criteria. You will find that of the 20 transactions, a substantial number of them are improper. I'm not going to tell you how many, but that's your goal to figure out which ones are proper according to the criteria. And then you need to report on your findings. So it's going to be a brief written summary. You should also describe your procedures and then summarize your findings in Excel. You can use tabular form, which like a pivot table, or graphical form, such as a bar chart. And you upload your written summary and the summary to Brightspace, okay? There is a note here I want to make sure that everybody is clear on because this has come up in the past and I want to make sure that we're clear. Please do not upload the escape room workbook that's part of the activity. So the assignment file that's on Brightspace, do not upload that or any modified version of that. This is going to be a standalone report. I already know what the contents of the workbook are. I created it, okay? So I don't need to see it again. But that's basically the activity. Yeah, and just so we can so we can know what your first goal is, your first task. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a push into the proper direction of what you're going to go, and then I'm going to set you free. So you'll notice here that there are 2 tabs. And you say, that doesn't seem to be enough to answer the problem, Dr. Barnes. Well, the truth is that if you right click, my computer is moving so slow. You right click, that there are more tabs, but you can't access them, okay? The workbook is currently protected. How do you unlock the workbook? Well, that is the first question to answer. Once you figure out how to unlock the workbook, you'll find more tabs, and those tabs will help you with the remaining parts of the activity. But you do need to actually fill that first task before you can do it. Now, I figure that it probably will not take, everybody in the room should be able to figure that out pretty quickly. After that, one thing I'm going to give you a personal piece of advice on, because this always comes up. So basically, you're going to have to figure out how to identify transactions. And basically what that means is that you need to figure out what part of the codes correspond to what clues that I've given you in the workbook. I strongly recommend that you develop a transaction code for every single transaction and don't try to identify the transactions piecemeal. And so basically what that means is there's like 200 something transactions. I would create a transaction based on the criteria that you identify for every single one of them, and then you can do your search for these specific transactions. Okay, is everybody clear on that? You could do this just identifying the only 2020 transactions. I think that takes more time to do that. I think if you figure out the code and then create the code for the entire worksheet, that's a much more efficient use of your time, as silly as that sounds. All right, so I'm going to pause the recording and then we'll reconvene close to the end of the class, and I'll talk about some things that people are getting stuck up on some certain areas, but I'm going to let you guys work. So quiet in the room. I'm assuming everybody is just deep in thought and deep in work. So first and foremost, has everybody managed to unlock the workbook? Okay. If you're not that point yet, then please let me know, because we want to get you to that point at some point. I think there was a differing degree, but most everybody I saw had it locked within the first 20 minutes or so. So obviously, you've got to figure out how to create the transaction code. Some of the parts of this are going to be easy. Some parts are a little bit challenging. So I want to give you a couple of hints, okay? And if you don't want a spoiler, if you're just like, I want to figure this out on my own, Dr. Barnes, stick your fingers in your ears and start just yelling really, really loud. That's the easy way to avoid it. So the first hint I'm going to give you is something you already know, but that for some reason people just really, really stumble on this. The internet is a really cool place, okay? You can find a lot of information. Like, for example, if you have a state name, you probably could find the abbreviation for that state name as well, okay? An ordered list of state names and abbreviations if you really, really try to do it. You know, I don't know why that might be relevant, but something for you to consider. Also, there's an interesting clue that I'm not going to get into, but we'll talk about it this way. So some people may be looking for a function to try to figure out what day of year a particular item occurs. To my knowledge, no such function exists. So you may have to use a little bit of chicanery to kind of figure that out. Now, there's multiple ways to go about this, but I do want to remind you of one thing that we've already talked about in this course. I think I've mentioned this multiple times. I think in this course, at the very least, I know I've said it to you in other courses. Just remember that date fields are numeric transformations. And the date that you're looking at is just basically going to be the number of days that have occurred since January 1st, 1900. So knowing that, you can actually create mathematical operations to figure out what information you're looking for if you're trying to figure out the day that occurred, or the day in the year that something occurred. So think about it that way. I won't give you exactly the direct hint, but if you're really struggling, I can give you a little bit more solid of a tip. But I think everybody's making pretty diligent progress. Like I said, I encourage you to do the transaction field for all of the transactions to make things a little bit easier later on when you're trying to do your analysis of the transactions. But with that, I'm going to call it good. You're free to work for as long as you want, at least until my next class. Okay, I'm not going to point any fingers at who I would be saying that to, but yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and I'll see you all on Monday.